Hey, friendo, Steve here. Are you ready to hear some hot takes? Some of the hottest takes on the internet about professional wrestling? Well, you've come to the right place because I put up a thread on the Wrestle Juice community tab, and oh my goodness, you guys responded in a big way. I asked for your hottest takes, past, present, future. 177 as of the time that I'm actually filming this video. So we're going to talk about a lot of these right here, but I've got enough to last me probably a month of hot takes. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Maybe we'll make it a weekly thing because I love talking wrestling. You guys love talking wrestling. Let's dive into it. Masked Man with 22 thumbs up, with 22 likes. And by the way, I want you guys to go to the community thread and find this post and give a thumbs up to any of the hot takes that you agree with, because it'll rise them to the top. And then in the next video, I will read some of those and get your and get your reactions in the comments of those. Masked Man says, if somebody in their 40s is more compelling to watch and listen to than somebody in their 20s, I'm perfectly okay with the old guy carrying the company into the future over the younger ones. I agree with this 1,000%. I think that athletes, professional wrestlers, are holding up a lot better than they used to because they're not doing steroids. And the older you get, the more wizened you become, the better a talker you become. This is, you can see this time after time after time. And I'm not going to say it's like universal, because there are some people in their 40s who still can't talk worth a damn. But a great example of this is, I clear this hair off my... where is this Goldberg. Back in the WCW days, he couldn't talk for shit. They didn't really have him talk very much. Eventually, when he came back to the WWE, like what, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, because he was then in his 40s, maybe 50s already, I forget. Goldberg was a really good promo. He's a really good talker. I think sometimes you just need that life experience for you to become your fully formed self. And I think that that happens. That perfect spot is like between 36 and 46 when it comes to pro wrestlers. They learn the ability to tell better stories in the ring. They understand what resonates with the crowd better. I feel like WWE shouldn't even be signing people until they're like 32. Let AEW, New Japan, Impact, TNA, whatever, let them take care of the developmental aspect of things, then sign them to WWE. I don't really think it's necessary, although I understand from their point of view wanting to get footage of their earlier careers. I'm not a huge fan of people spending their entire career in WWE. I always feel like there's so much evidence to suggest that wrestlers who go elsewhere early in their career, maybe start off in WWE, go somewhere else, build your brand, so to speak, your name, your character, this, that, the other, learn how to promo. I remember Chris Jericho's documentary that WWE produced. He talked about going from each territory in his early days and what he learned in each of those territories. One of the places he worked at, he learned his in-ring style, and what worked there. One of the territories, he learned how to interact with the crowd and what works there. One of the territories, he learned his promo skills. I think it's really smart for wrestlers to travel before they end up in WWE, assuming, and it's a safe assumption to make, WWE is going to be sort of like the end-all, be-all, the pinnacle, the place where you go to make the big money, to have the biggest audience, to have the biggest platform. I'm just down. I think older wrestlers have it. I think when you look at the younger wrestlers, I mean, there are some exceptions. Guys like Carmelo Hayes, who's probably in his 30s by now. I don't know how old Carmelo Hayes is, but you look at a lot of these wrestlers, and I don't know. I think a lot of them do benefit from going other places. There are like exceptions, like, for example, John Cena. I know he was an OVW before, but he didn't really have much of like an indie career before he went to WWE. Orton, Lesnar, et cetera, et cetera. But still, Lesnar was a lot more compelling after he left and came back. Orton, I kind of feel he probably could have benefited from going to New Japan or something, but I don't know. He came up in a different era. But these days, there's so many other alternatives out there for wrestlers to make money. I think it's silly for them just to stick to WWE. Now I want to know how old Carmelo Hayes is. Carmelo Hayes is exactly 29 years old, so he's almost 30. WWE should sign him in 3 years. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Joel Tapia says, in my opinion, we are in the greatest era in wrestling history. I agree with this. I 1,000% agree with this. Yes, the Attitude Era, the Monday Night War, all that was a time when wrestling was unmatched in terms of its pop culture penetration. Oh man, if you will. The rock and roll or the rock and wrestling era of wrestling burst wrestling up into the mainstream. However, that was at a time when there were all of 4 channels on television and nobody except for Larson had cable television. So there wasn't anything else really in terms of competition. There wasn't a whole lot of competition. Fast forward to the Attitude Era, there was cable TV, but there was no TikTok, YouTube, social media, Twitter, Instagram, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on streaming services. So people were limited to, I don't know, it was like 50 basic cable channels. USA was one of them. TNT was one of them. And so, yes, it took the world by storm because, again, no internet, no social. Okay, there is internet, but it wasn't like it was today. You guys know what I'm talking about. No social media, this, that, the other. There was such a smaller amount of competition back then. These days, when you look at the last year of wrestling, WWE's on fire because of the stories and characters. AEW creatively, they might be struggling right now, but a lot of people still really love AEW, and they are providing probably week to week some of the best actual pro wrestling you can catch on television. Worldwide, you can watch wrestling from all parts of the world just by hopping on the internet. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on all the different streaming services there are. If you want to watch it, you can watch it. You do not have to rely on tape trading or anything like that. If you want it, it's yours. There is pro wrestling for everybody. You're able to go outside the typical WWE system and make a shit ton of money if you're that good and if you're that savvy. I 1,000% agree with Joel. We are in the greatest era of wrestling history. Absolutely. I agree with that. I really do. Nick Widman says the NXT revamp was a great move. Perfect mix of great wrestling and entertainment. Character/talent development is steered towards main roster longevity. So I know NXT is sort of like becoming the internet darling right now. Everybody loves it. I really do appreciate a lot of the work that goes on there in NXT. Shawn Michaels is actually a really terrific booker, I feel. A lot of really, really great wrestling happens here. Some of that has to do with them bringing over seasoned wrestlers from NXT UK and dumping them into NXT. Some are just like really good, like Carmelo Hayes had a career before NXT, before he showed up in WWE. And so he was already a seasoned wrestler. So there is a mix of like good established wrestlers with people who have come up in the system, in the WWE system, and have developed into really good wrestlers and acts that are really over. That being said, a great move. It's still we're talking 2 years down the line. And when it actually happened, it was, in my opinion, stupid, because they took the brand that was so highly acclaimed, and yes, it would lose to AEW in the ratings, but when you look at AEW and NXT Black and Gold side by side, AEW had a lot more going for it. It really should have been dominating NXT in the ratings a lot more than they actually were at the time. Usually NXT would come within, I don't know, 100,000 viewers, which when AEW is getting like 1 million or 800,000 and NXT was pulling like 700,000 or 800,000, I don't feel like it was that much of a beatdown, but AEW had a lot going for it. Bigger production, bigger venues, former WWE main roster stars, people from New Japan that people had heard buzz about maybe or were already familiar with watching them. And it was this big counterculture anti-WWE. WWE's booking at the time was really lazy. And so to punish NXT, and come on, we all know this is the truth, to punish Triple H for not beating AEW, Vince McMahon, once Triple H got sick, completely wiped the floor with NXT, clean slated it, and made it look like a Nickelodeon show. And there was that awkward mix of guys who could barely wrestle because they've only been signed for like 6 months, and leftovers from NXT who suddenly like could barely eke out victories against people who've only been wrestling for 6 months, having to carry them through matches. It was awkward. It was silly. Yes, they have been able to grow and develop and get better over the course of 2 years. And I think that's terrific for NXT. And I love that people are into it. I love that there's so much women's wrestling happening there. They really treat their divisions excellently across the board. I don't think it was a great move. I think they probably could have taken the black and gold thing and built on it, as opposed, I mean, pandemic changed a lot of stuff, and I wonder if NXT might have, if WWE had really invested more resources and money into NXT, maybe did a little bit of what they're doing now, bring some main roster, actual stars, not people who are struggling on main roster, but actual stars main roster, and integrated them into NXT, I think it would have been a much different story. And if they would have been able to get out in front of crowds, I think it would have been a much different story. I don't know that would have happened because AEW did pandemic very well. Like, they handled the pandemic very, very well, the way they presented their show. Darius the Great says the Austin Theory Waller tag team is only showing just how much better Waller is at the arrogant heel gimmick than Theory, and not really helping either guy. Theory needs a complete character reboot, whether from just being off TV for a while or going back to NXT. I like this team, but after reading this, I kind of agree with it. I don't know that it's doing a lot for Waller, although here's my idea. You throw Pretty Deadly in with them as like a full faction, and then I think maybe everybody gets elevated. You get like, and you focus on them, you give them some wins, maybe a title or the tag title, something like that. I don't know, a mid-card title. And maybe you're onto something. Waller is really good. Waller, I had him pegged at like sort of a Miz level guy, and that's not very high for me personally. He is really entertaining. Grayson Waller is incredibly entertaining. He has taken to main roster really, really well. He's already surpassed Austin Theory in terms of pretty much everything. I agree with that. Theory does need a complete character reboot, but I'm actually willing to give this tag team a shot. I want to give it some time and see if they can evolve in a similar way to, like, I don't know, a DX. If you look at Triple H before DX, he was absolutely nowhere. With DX, it really turned it around for him. So maybe this can do that for Austin Theory. But I agree, Theory is not where he should be at all. Everybody's lapping him. Wyatt JD says WrestleMania 39 is the second best WrestleMania behind X7. People hate it because of the Cody versus Roman ending, but when nostalgia kicks in a few years, and after Cody finally wins the belt, they'll look back on it in a much more positive light. There wasn't a bad match on the whole card, and Shane McMahon doesn't count. Yeah, WrestleMania 39 was really good. It was really good. I don't know, it might be too early to like really stack it up in history against the best WrestleManias. I guess X7 is considered to be sort of the best one. X7, 17, I don't know why I keep on saying X7. 17 always has that bad taste in my mouth from the very end when Austin joined McMahon. That I'd have to go back and revisit that pay-per-view because, man, that ending really was just a turd to me. Kind of ruined the entire experience for me, but I don't know. I always liked the one after this one, the one where they had like, because wasn't Rock Hogan on the one after this one, and I don't know, like Flair, Undertaker. I don't know. There was like a bunch of good matches on the one after this. They might not have been great. Then like Stone Cold versus the NWO. Wasn't that at X8? X8, 18? I don't know. That was my favorite. But just because the lineup was so good, not necessarily because of the matches. Goach Art says Jimmy betraying the bloodline, the people who put him in a hospital, just to arbitrarily come back a few weeks later was completely nonsensical, but people will make up excuses for them in order to believe it is still the greatest storyline in wrestling. Well, here's the thing. It is the greatest storyline in all of wrestling in the history of the sport. I agree with that. What I do not agree with is that this was not nonsensical. Jimmy coming back and saying, I did this so that you don't become Roman. And then he completely changed his character right after that says to me that they thought they had a direction for him in mind. It immediately didn't work. And then they pivoted to him simply trying to be Roman Reigns, which I think was a smart move. Yes, Jimmy's reasoning for screwing over Jay was completely nonsensical in the grand scheme of things when he didn't really follow up on that. And yeah, that was a moment where it was kind of clear they didn't really either they didn't think that one out, or it didn't play out the way they wanted it to, and so they made a pivot, and it was a smart pivot because I think Jimmy's really entertaining right now. I agree with this, though. I think that one moment was nonsensical. I don't think one moment kills an entire storyline, though. It is the greatest wrestling storyline of all time, and you can't tell me another one. Donnie Bravo says the quality of a title reign means way more than the overall title wins and should be emphasized more. I agree. I personally kind of feel like the length of a title reign means more at this point. Like, I just don't care. To me, especially watching, like, it goes back to CM Punk's reign of 434 days, right? That was impressive, especially when you have like so many other stars in the company. That was impressive. Fast forward to Roman Reigns. This is going to go down as one of the greatest reigns of all time. Not just because it is part of the greatest wrestling story of all time, but simply because of how big of a deal. I know people still complain about Roman Reigns not being around that much and not defending the title that much. I personally do not complain about that because it feels special whenever he's there. And there's so many other good things going on in WWE that it doesn't bother me that he doesn't defend the title very often. It just seems like rarefied air. I kind of like that. So yeah, I think the quality of a title reign is, and the length of a title reign, in that order, quality, length, should be emphasized much more than a Ric Flair 17 times, a John Cena 16 times, or whatever it is. I forget the actual number. Or Charlotte Flair winning it a bunch. It doesn't mean a whole lot if you win it and you lose it a couple days later, and then you win it back and you lose it a couple days later. Like, that to me doesn't mean much. So the number really doesn't mean anything. The reason why people are more interested, I think, in Roman Reigns and referring to the Bruno, is he going to beat Bruno's record? They care about that more than I feel they do if Roman Reigns was at 13 or 14 or 15 times, and he might break the Flair record. I think that is not an unimpressive record, but the actual reign itself, what that means, this person the company believed in for a very, very, very long period of time, in a period of time, mind you, like I just said, where there's all sorts of competition. Yeah, I think the quality of a title reign, that's a lot more impressive than the number of times you've had a title. That's going to do it for this episode of Hot Takes. We got a ton more in this thread. Keep on loading them up if you want to, and I'll take them look at more of these next week. We'll see you guys around. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you around.